Chapter 6, The Seneca Falls Convention. The big question: why might some newspapers have made fun of the women's movement and its demands? A women's right convention on July 14, 1848. This notice appeared in the Seneca Country Courier newspaper. Women's Right Convention. A convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious conditions and rights of women will be held in the Wesleyan Chapel at Seneca Falls, New York. Few would have guessed that the short announcement would start one of the biggest reform movements in U.S. history. The idea for a women's right convention had been born 8 years earlier. You remember the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London? When women delegates were told they could watch from the balcony, but not take part. Two of the women sitting in that balcony were Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Lucretia Mott and her husband James were active in many of the reform movements of the day. Mott once organized a campaign asking people not to buy products made or raised by enslaved workers. Those products included cotton, clothing, sugar, and rice. She hoped that would convince plantation owners to give up slavery. Still, despite her reform work, Mott always felt that as a woman, she did not receive the same level of respect as a man. She later said that women's rights were the most important question of my life from a very early day. As for Elizabeth Cady, she learned about the unequal treatment of women very early in her life. Her father was a lawyer and a judge. "Oh, my daughter," he said on one occasion, "I wish you were a boy." As a girl, Elizabeth could never become a lawyer like her father. Cady resolved to show her father that she was as good as a boy. She learned to play games such as chess that were said to be beyond the mental powers of girls and women. She studied Greek and Latin. She studied mathematics. Still, no matter how well she did, she could not go to college. Colleges were for men only. Cady had to attend a school for women in Troy, New York instead. After graduating, Cady became active in a number of reform movements. She soon met Harry B. Stanton, a leader of the anti-slavery movement. The two decided to marry. In those days, women promised to love, honor, and obey their husbands in a marriage vow. Elizabeth Cady insisted on removing the word obey. The Stantons spent their honeymoon in London, England, where they attended the World Anti-Slavery Convention. Lucretia Mott was a good deal older than Elizabeth Cady Stanton. The two had never met before the London meeting. Both were angered by their treatment. By the time they left London, they had promised each other to hold a convention on women's rights in the United States. Seneca Falls. For 8 years, nothing came of the promise. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was busy raising a family. Lucretia Mott was involved in her activities. Then on July 13, 1848, Mott visited the Stanton home in Seneca Falls, New York. That afternoon, over a cup of tea, Stanton, Mott, and 3 local women decided to hold the long-delayed convention. They would have it in Seneca Falls 6 days from that day. On July 19, 200 women, and even some men, showed up at the Wesleyan Chapel. On the second day, a larger crowd of women and men attended. Among them was the abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Elizabeth Cady Stanton read aloud a declaration of sentiments she had written. The declaration's first words echoed another famous declaration: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal." Stanton went on to list 50 ways that women were treated unequally. At the end of the declaration, Elizabeth Cady Stanton shocked the audience. She demanded that women be given the right to vote. For some reformers, that was going too far. Lucretia Mott tried to discourage her friends, demanding, "The vote will make us look ridiculous," she said. "We must go slowly." But Mott eventually agreed. So did a majority of the convention. Today it is hard to imagine anyone disagreeing with the goals of the Seneca Falls Convention. However, that was a different time. The few newspapers that paid attention to the meeting made fun of it. One laughed at the women's demands to vote, become lawyers, and keep their own property. While they were at it, said the newspaper, they should have demanded that men wash dishes, handle the broom, darn stockings, wear trinkets, and look beautiful. None of this ridicule stopped the women's movement. After the Seneca Falls meeting, women had half a dozen other states organize similar meetings. More heroes. The movement for women's rights had other heroines besides Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott. There was Lucy Stone, the first American woman to deliver a public lecture on women's rights. When Lucy Stone married, she kept her own name. There was Elizabeth Blackwell. She became the first woman graduate of a medical college. There was Amelia Bloomer. She wore large, roomy trousers and wore a short skirt over them because they were more comfortable than the heavy dresses women were expected to wear. There was also a woman named Sojourner Truth. Nearly 6 feet tall and wearing a white turban, Sojourner Truth became a familiar person at public meetings on women's rights. She was a former enslaved worker. She could not read or write, but she could speak. And those who said women were weak, Sojourner said, I have as much muscle as any man. I can do as much work as any man. I have plowed and reaped and husked and chopped and mowed. And can any man do more than that? When Sojourner Truth was speaking at a different convention, a few rowdy men showed up to jeer. Sojourner Truth had these words for them. I am sorry to see some men so short-minded, but we'll have our rights. See if we don't. And you can't stop us from them. See if you can. You may hiss as much as you'd like, but it's coming. Sojourner Truth was right, but it would be some time before it happened.